I've had 3 different MPs from 3 different regions independently basically tell me, almost using the same language, that Canada is in a controlled demolition.
Wow.
You know, our masters we're no longer nation building, we're nation destruction. So they need to destabilize the pillars of the society. It's literally the communist handbook, so that we can be remade into a communist nation. So you have to get God out of the picture first. And that's the first thing they did. Yeah. They got God out of the schools, they got out of our institutions. Yeah. They basically demonized Christianity. So you got to do that. You got to destabilize the family. They have to destabilize us economically. The biggest obstacle is always the middle class. And in Canada, the middle class is most of their wealth, which is their power, is in the equity of their homes, is in the equity of their land. So they have to destroy that. As you know, other governments, when they get to the point we're going to go full-blown communism, well, they actually just pass a law outlawing private property, and all of a sudden you don't own your land anymore. Right? So that might not go over well in Canada. So I've been talking about how, no, actually, they're going to overlay Aboriginal title onto our title and basically make our equity meaningless, and so confuse ownership so that we really have no meaningful ownership. We have no meaningful equity. Well, now we're in a firmly of the opinion that that Canada is under a deliberate creative destruction. And so there's several elements to that, but you basically have to completely undermine the foundations of a nation if you want to rebuild it in a different image. And that almost everything that's happening around us can be explained this way, and this is part of it. So when you talk about UNDRIP, you're talking about the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and this is a treaty, and that the federal government signed. Now, everyone can get a copy of this treaty, and there's lots written on this treaty. But basically, this treaty obligates countries that sign this treaty to vest property into the ownership of the indigenous people that preceded European colonization. And it's funny that we even use the word colonization, because all of history is one people coming and displacing another. And the indigenous tribes would have done that too, including to each other. And yet we're not going, we're going to go back in time and figure out, well, who had it before them? So Canada, without telling people what this treaty says, and without telling people that, well, it obligates us to basically transfer ownership, especially of unceded territory, to indigenous people. But it's not just unceded territory. That's just, the BC decision. It was unceded territory. So, where I live, we've got Treaty 6. It's ceded. So I have no doubt that eventually, because this is all by design, if we allow it to keep happening, then the next step legally is for the courts to say, well, okay, unceded territory, that the natives or the indigenous people, they have the property and they own it. But with the ceded territory, they were really duped. They didn't understand our legal structure. They didn't understand what they were giving up. They didn't even have that conception of ownership. So these are invalid treaties. And because they're invalid treaties, then really all of Canada is unceded land. And we're going to follow this UN treaty that we've signed and vest ownership. So it's really the king transferring ownership from himself to indigenous tribes. Now, I expect at the end of the day, the king still is somehow vested. But let's say it does all go to the indigenous tribes. What sane government in Canada has the authority? So if we assume that, elected governments, and I've already indicated to you that's an absolute fraud farce anyway, but what government would possibly do that, let alone do it without a public debate? And it's not by accident. So here we've got the Liberal government basically giving the Lower Mainland to a band with, my understanding, is less than 2,000 members. How does that do anything but destabilize the province of British Columbia and Canadian finances? Because the legal fallout from that will be is you won't be able to refinance your property or get a mortgage. And you don't even know now what that band is going to do. Are they going to kick you out? Are they going to lease the property to you? I mean, what does this look like? And can you imagine? I mean, and the commercial properties. What is this? What is this going to do to destabilize Canada? Like, who knows? And so, how does this happen without a public debate?